What's up, everybody? So for today, we're going to be looking at mix automation. Mix automation is going to follow along with our mix theory number 1 video, where we looked at the sound stage. So in your left and right speakers, you can imagine that there's a stage in front of you, just like you would normally see if you were in a concert, a live concert venue, an arena, whatnot. So that sound stage has width and it has depth. Okay. The width is the left and the right hand side of the speakers themselves. So they usually start and stop about half the width of the speakers. And the depth can be as close to you as your nose and as far away from you as infinity. So the stage itself has an environment as well. You can be a certain distance away from the stage, and the stage can have a space around it. For example, you could have this stage in a small cafe. You can have this stage in a large arena. You can have that stage in a church. So the stage and the environment itself is what we basically do, is we build what instruments are going to be on that stage at a particular time, depending on when the song starts and stops. Now, depending on what instruments we want to put on this stage, we can actually put them to the left, to the right, and give them some sort of distance away from the listener. We usually determine the front of the stage by the closest instrument to the listener itself. So in this particular slide, it would be that vocal, followed by the bass, followed by the drums a little bit further back. On this particular sound stage, we have a guitar on the left, an acoustic guitar, and we have an acoustic guitar on the right. How we determine how far left and how far right and the distance away from those instruments is by using volume and panning. Okay, the louder the instrument, the closer it's going to be on the stage. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. As you move that fader up for loudness, it's going to get closer to the listener. As you move the fader down, it's going to get further away. Now for panning, we can either move it to the left or to the right. So that really does depend on how much volume is going to go either to the left speaker or to the right speaker. If we wanted the instrument to be all the way over to the left, we would have 100% volume in the left speaker and 0% volume on the right speaker. That would move it to the left. If we want it to be to the right, we would have 100% volume in the right speaker and 0% in the left. Now, as you start moving that panner or that instrument somewhere in between, we start to move those ratios a little bit more until we get 50-50, which would be dead center in the middle of the sound stage. Most of the time, you don't have to worry about these ratios because that panner knob will do the ratios for you. So oftentimes, what we see is, depending on what the song is calling for, we would see a change of soundstage between the verse and the chorus of a particular song. For the song that we're going to be showing you in the next couple of minutes, we're going to be following these two sound stages. The biggest difference between the soundstage for the verse and the soundstage for the chorus is that vocal number 2 is going to move from the left to the right depending on the word of the song. So we are going to see a little bit of a change of soundstage just for the chorus, and that's going to bring attention to that particular instrument to bring out the message of the music just a little bit more. What you'll also see is the acoustic guitar and the electric guitar kind of move in a tiny bit. So we are going to move those panners in just a tiny bit for those choruses as well. But for this particular lecture, we're going to be focusing on automation. How can we automate that vocal so that in the verse it's going to be on the left-hand side, and then for the chorus it's going to move around a little bit more. Okay, so I went ahead and did a quick mix of this song. First off, we organized all the tracks. Just for my own particular preference, I like to do kick, snare, overhead left, overhead right. So I have basically all my rhythm on my left and all of my lead instruments on my right. Then we did bass, we have two different types of acoustic guitar, and we have an electric guitar. We also have a backup vocals, and we have a regular vocals. So for this particular track, remember, we're following those two charts. Where the acoustic guitar is going to be on the left, the electric guitar is going to be on the right, and then we're going to have that secondary vocal move from left to right, especially during the chorus. So if we take a listen to this song. Man who wakes up next to you when I go out. Yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who walks along with you. If I get drunk, well, I know I'm gonna be. Okay, we want to focus on that secondary vocal, so I'm just going to minimize the rest of my tracks except for vocal number 2. And we're really going to focus in on this one right now. Okay. So as we are, so what I ended up doing is grouping it by accident. So let me just ungroup it. There we go. Man who wakes up next to you when I go out. Yeah, I know I'm gonna be. And I will walk 500 miles an hour. Here's my secondary vocal. So obviously we have a little bit of bleed through in that track, but that's not that big of a deal. What we really want to focus on, though, is moving the vocal from left to right, especially on the da-da-da-ba parts. Okay, those are the parts we want to move from left to right. So I'm going to go over here where it says trim, which is actually more of that automation. So that that little symbol often is among a bunch of different digital audio workstations. That's the automation symbol. And what we're looking for is automating panning. Now, you can automate a bunch of different parameters on your tracks. If you have some plugins in here, you most likely see some automation regarding the plugins as well. But for this one, we want to automate panning because we want to move it left and right. So I'm going to close that out. Now, when we do automation for panning, oftentimes what happens is the center of your pan is right in the middle. As we want to move that from left to right, if we move the line up, it's on the left-hand side. If we move it down, it's on the right. So the way automation works is very similar to video, where we want to insert a keyframe. A keyframe states that at this particular point, we want that parameter to be this very specific parameter at that point in time. So we're going to insert a keyframe so that it's on the left-hand side over here and then the right-hand side over here. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Zooming in is always tricky. Put it on this side. Okay. So as we go, da 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 da. I want this one to be on the left, and I want this one to be on the right. So in Reaper, you can do keyframes two different ways. If you right-click, you can create a new point. And what that'll do is create this little circle. And at that point right there, you can say, I want the automation to either be center, left, or right. I'm also going to create a secondary point right behind it. So it's going to be centered. That vocal will be centered all the way through until we get to right here. At that point, we're going to move that panner all the way to the left, and that vocal will then be on the left-hand side of your stereo spectrum. Okay, so as you notice, it's going to ramp all the way to that point. If we wanted to make that ramp even shorter, we could then close down that point, and then it moves it immediately to that left-hand side. You can also shift-click in Reaper to create another automation point. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create an automation point right over here, so that then finally when we get over to this side, now I'm going past the center line, and it's going to go all the way over to the right. So now the vocal starts left and stays right. Okay, but I don't want it to just stay right. I want it to go back to the middle for that other portion. So I'm actually going to have it ramp to the middle. and it moves to the middle. And we're going to do the same thing over at this point. Now, sometimes this doesn't sound too good. I like to have them ramp up a little bit more, so it's a little bit more of a gradual movement. Okay, there we go. And then this one, I want it over here. So it's going to go da-da-da-da on the left, da-da-da-da on the right, and then it's going to move towards the middle as she continues to sing. Watch how smoother this is. Okay, now with the rest of the mix, okay, so we're going to create that sort of ping pong effect between left and right. Okay, so according to our chart, what we want to do is we want to automate that acoustic guitar and that electric guitar. So we want that acoustic guitar to be on the left-hand side, the electric guitar to be on the right-hand side. So if we go into our automation points, we're going to automate the panning again on both the acoustic and the electric. Now, again, for the acoustic, we already had it hard panned all the way to the left. And for the electric, we already had it hard panned all the way to the right. So we want to then switch those pannings to be in just a tiny bit for the chorus. So as we listen. So right at that point, it needs to come in a little bit. So I'm going to create a new automation point. I'm going to create one behind it. And what that's going to do is it's going to keep the panning all the way left during that particular point, and then I'm going to bring it in to about halfway in the stereo spectrum, maybe about 60% at that point. And I'm going to do the same exact thing on the electric guitar. I'm going to create a new point, and then right at this particular point in time, come on, create a new point. I'm going to move that in about the same amount, right? So 60%. Okay? So now as the song plays, those guitars are now going to move in a little bit more. So soloed. Okay, so that's what we want to see. Now, this is going to be even more noticeable when we get to the verse, and the verse is going to be... Okay, so that's the verse point right here. So I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to create 2 points. I'm going to shift-click this time so that now during that chorus, it stays more towards the middle, and then we hard pan it right at that particular point. And same thing over here. Once we get to this point, I'm going to hard pan it left. So now, when I'm working, yes, I know I'm going to be the man who's... That really pulls left and pulls right. So again, listening to that isolated. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to create space for the vocal to come back in, right? We want to sort of open up the whole entire mix for the verses and then really condense it down so that we have more of a wall of sound for those choruses. So in the end, this is automation. The ability to automatically change your mix depending on what the song is actually calling for. Are you looking to get more of a tight sound for the choruses, or are you looking to get more of an open up sound for the entire mix? It really does depend on what the producer and the artist are sort of thinking about in terms of the mood of this song. And with automation, you can program the changes so that you have a much more precise mix.